My name is Anita Grace Evans. I'm 24 years old. And this is the story of how my mother tried to erase me from my own family, and how my grandfather made sure I'd never be forgotten. The day my world cracked open wasn't loud. There were no slammed doors, no screaming matches. Just a small lie, a tight smile, and a phone call that shattered everything I thought I knew. It started with a funeral I never got to attend. I had been in my university's research lab when I received the message. Grandpa passed away. Funeral's Thursday at 2 p.m. Don't be late. It was from my mother, Claire Evans. The woman who had once braided my hair every morning before school and told me girls should never cry in public. Now, she barely texted me except to remind me to stay out of family business. I packed my things that night in silence, not even telling my roommate where I was going. I took the earliest train home, my stomach knotted in a way I couldn't untangle. My grandfather, Thomas Evans, had been the only person in that family who looked at me like I was made of light, not burden. And now he was gone. But I would be there to say goodbye. I had to be. Except I wasn't. I arrived at the church at 1:30, dressed in the black dress Grandma Rose had bought me years ago, the one I saved for special things. But when I pushed open the doors, the pews were empty. A janitor with a mop glanced up. "You just missed it," he said. "Ended at 10 a.m. They all left around noon." The words stung like vinegar on an open wound. I stumbled outside, hands trembling, and called my mother. "You missed it," she said coolly, as though she hadn't given me the wrong time. "Emma," I said 10. "You must have misheard." I didn't mishear. I had written it down. But I didn't argue. My voice had never mattered in that house anyway. I hung up without saying goodbye and walked to the only place that had ever felt like home, Grandma and Grandpa's house on Cypress Street. The door creaked open before I could knock. Grandma Rose stood there, thin and pale, but with those same sharp eyes. "So now you remember the way home," she said, her voice colder than the wind. I froze. "Grandma, I just heard about Grandpa. I came straight from school. Mom told me." "Don't," she interrupted, raising a frail hand. "He called you, over and over before he passed. He asked for you. 'Where's Anita?' he kept saying." I shook my head, heart thudding. "I never got a call. I've had the same number since I was 16. She disappeared into the house and returned with a small, worn notebook. She flipped to the last page with trembling fingers. I stared down at the digits written in his familiar, slanted handwriting. It wasn't my number. It wasn't even close. "Your parents told us you changed it," Grandma said. "That you didn't want to keep in touch." I sank down onto the porch steps, my mind spinning. "That's not true," I whispered. "Last year I came here during spring break. Madison opened the door and told me you two were in a nursing home. She wouldn't let me in." Grandma's face went pale. "What nursing home?" She said Grandpa's mind was going. "That neither of you wanted visitors." My voice cracked. Mom confirmed it. She gave me some fake name, said there were lockdowns, no visitors allowed. "We've never left this house," Grandma said, her voice faint. The wind brushed my shoulder, but I barely felt it. What I felt was betrayal. Cold and deliberate. My own family had rewritten the truth while I was away. They'd painted me as the one who abandoned him. But they were the ones who'd kept me out. "I was at the church," I said. "I was there. I waited. But it was all over." Grandma's eyes softened for a moment, and for the first time since I arrived, she reached out and touched my hand. "He died thinking you left him," she whispered. That was when I broke. The tears came without permission, hot and relentless. She pulled me into her arms, bony and trembling, but still the safest place I'd ever known. I buried my face in her shoulder like I used to when I was little and scraped my knees. This pain was deeper, older. It lived in my chest like a ghost I hadn't known was there until it screamed. When we finally pulled apart, she looked me in the eye and said something I will never forget. Claire lied to me. Madison lied. But I will not let them lie about you anymore. Today, we end this. She picked up her phone and dialed. I only heard fragments. Claire. Brandon. Madison, come to the house. Now. Yes, it's about the will. I blinked. The will? She nodded. Your grandfather left instructions. Spencer, the lawyer, will be here too. I've kept silent for too long, Anita. It's time you hear what Thomas really left behind. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea she made, though I couldn't feel the warmth through the storm swirling inside me. I thought about all the times I'd been pushed out, the holidays I wasn't invited to, the gifts that never came, the birthday messages that got lost. But now, for once, I wasn't going to be a silent footnote. At 4 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Grandma glanced at me and said, "Stay in the kitchen. Don't come out until I call you." I listened as familiar voices filled the living room. My mother's high heels, Madison's clipped laugh, my Uncle Brandon's disinterested tone. "What's this about, Mom?" my mother asked. We were in the middle of planning Madison's engagement party. "She's not part of this," Madison chimed in. "She hasn't been part of this family for years." Grandma's voice rang out, low and firm. "Sit down. Spencer is here to read the will." And then, silence. Followed by the sharp click of a briefcase opening. "This is the last will and testament of Mr. Thomas Evans," Spencer began. "Drafted 3 months ago. Witnessed and notarized." I held my breath. Per his wishes, this reading must include his 2 children, Claire and Brandon, and his granddaughters, Madison and Anita. The air shifted. My mother's voice turned cold. "Anita?" I stood, walked slowly into the living room, and faced them. My mother's smile tightened into something plastic. Madison's mouth fell open. Uncle Brandon blinked like I'd come back from the dead. But I said nothing. I just looked at Spencer and nodded. "I'm here. Let's continue." Spencer adjusted his glasses, clearly unfazed by the tension. His voice remained calm, professional, but every word he spoke hit the room like a hammer. "As stated, this will include specific instructions regarding property, financial assets, and personal notes left by Mr. Evans." I stood to the side, eyes on the floor, arms crossed over my chest, but my ears caught every shift of breath, every sharp inhale. "The house on Cypress Street," Spencer continued, "is to remain in the possession of Mrs. Rose Evans, along with a trust to ensure her comfort and care for the remainder of her life." No one contested that. Grandma had lived there all her life. It was expected. But it was the next part that lit the fuse. Mr. Evans owned a biotechnology research center located in East Edgefield. It is newly established, fully equipped, and debt-free. Full ownership and operational control are to be transferred to Anita Grace Evans. Silence. Madison gasped, then laughed, a high-pitched, almost hysterical sound. "You've got to be kidding me." Spencer didn't look up. "There's more. Remaining liquid assets, investments, and company shares will be split equally between Madison Evans and Anita Evans." The room broke into chaos. "This is ridiculous," Madison shouted, rising from her chair. "She's been gone. She ghosted Grandpa, ghosted all of us. And now you're handing her a company?" I didn't react. I couldn't. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, something else. A strange kind of disbelief that after all these years of being unseen, my name was finally being spoken with meaning. My mother turned on me with a cool fury in her eyes. "You heard it. Madison's always been the one here. You think you deserve what your grandfather built? A company? Money?" Her voice dropped to a condescending whisper, sharp enough to cut. "You're still in college. What do you know about running a business?" "I know more than you think," I said quietly. She scoffed, turning to Spencer. "This can't be final. You have to understand, my daughter is not fit to manage something like this." Spencer's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Mr. Evans' wishes were very clear, Ms. Evans. He provided detailed reasoning in a letter addressed to all of you. Mrs. Rose Evans has the original. I've brought a copy." Grandma opened the drawer of the hallway cabinet, pulled out a sealed envelope with Grandpa's handwriting on the front, and handed it to Spencer. The lawyer unfolded it slowly. Then he began reading aloud. "If Anita is present for the reading of this will, it means the truth has finally reached the one who deserves to know it. To my granddaughter, the little scientist who once built a homemade microscope out of a jar lens and duct tape, you've always been the spark. The one this family tried to dim, but never could. The research center is yours because I believe in your mind and your heart. Don't sell it. Build it. Change the world." The paper rustled in Spencer's hands as he paused. You could hear a pin drop. "To Claire, Brandon, and Madison, if you're hearing this, I'm gone, and you've all had years to look in the mirror. But you never did. You created a version of the truth where Anita was the villain. Where she was the selfish one. But I was there. I saw who shut doors in her face. I saw who told her she was too much, too weird, too ambitious." My chest rose with the slow burn of validation. My eyes welled up, but I blinked the tears back. "Madison, you performed affection. You checked boxes, thinking I wouldn't see through it. But love isn't measured by weekly visits or fake smiles. It's in the questions you never asked. In the silence when Anita stood outside that door, holding cookies for me, and you sent her away." Madison's face turned ghost white. "This inheritance isn't about reward. It's about correction. Anita, they pushed you out of the frame, but I saw the whole picture. I only hope this helps you feel what you always deserved to feel, seen." The letter ended. Spencer folded it slowly and handed it back to Grandma, who held it close to her chest like a fragile truth finally unearthed. Madison's eyes burned into me. "You're not better than me," she spat. "You're not even family anymore." I tilted my head. "Then why are you so mad I got the family's legacy?" She lunged toward me like she wanted to scream in my face, but Grandma's voice rang out like thunder. "Enough." The force in her voice made Madison freeze. Everyone else fell silent. "You lied to me," Grandma said, looking straight at my mother. "You said Anita changed her number. That she didn't want anything to do with us. But Thomas tried calling her. Over and over. You let him die thinking she had abandoned him." My mother's face flushed, but she didn't deny it. "I trusted you," Grandma continued, her voice cracking. "But now I see. You didn't protect your daughter. You erased her." Uncle Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Rose, maybe this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," Grandma snapped. I turned to Spencer. "What happens now?" "All transfers are already in motion," he said. "You'll be contacted this week to finalize ownership of the research center. As for the house and the financial assets, everything will be split per the document. Any challenges will need to go through the court system, but given the clarity of this will, I doubt any will succeed." Madison sat down hard, her lips trembling. My mother looked away, defeated. Uncle Brandon, he just sighed and muttered something under his breath. "And me?" I stood there, not triumphant, but whole. For the first time in my life. Because someone finally told the truth. Someone finally saw me. And nothing they could say or do would undo that. When Spencer left, the silence he left behind was louder than any of Madison's tantrums or my mother's whispered lies. The living room, once a place where I'd quietly sat at the edge of family conversations, was now the stage where truth had shattered years of manipulation. And for the first time, I wasn't the outsider. I was the center. Madison refused to look at me. She crossed her arms and stared into space like a spoiled child refusing to admit she'd lost. My mother clutched her leather purse in her lap, her lips pursed into a tight, white line. Uncle Brandon had already slipped away, muttering something about needing air, though I knew it was just another escape. He was always better at disappearing than speaking up. I remained standing. Grandma, still seated, slowly unfolded Grandpa's letter once more. Thomas wrote more than just instructions, she said. He wrote truth. And now I want all of you to hear every single word. Her voice was firm, and there was no protest. Not even from Madison. She read. Rose, if you're holding this letter, it means the truth has finally come to light. I'm no longer here to say it aloud, so I'll write it instead. I love both of my granddaughters, but I'm not blind. Anita is remarkable. At 8 years old, she asked me how enzymes work and why the stars don't fall. She once cleaned pennies with lemon juice and called it magic. That was the moment I knew she would build things that outlast all of us. I sat slowly in the corner chair, my chest tight, my hands clenched. Claire always said Anita was too much. Too strange. Too intense. Brandon said nothing. Madison was always praised, protected, encouraged, but Anita? Every achievement was a burden to the family pride. Every science medal was treated like a provocation. I remember the night she cried alone in the kitchen after winning the district fair and no one asked how she felt. Grandma's voice cracked slightly, but she kept reading. Only Rose and I ever celebrated her for who she was. What do you call that, Rose? I call it poison. This family let it seep in slowly, into every birthday dinner where Anita was ignored, every graduation where Madison was praised louder, every time Claire said, "Can't you just be normal?" and Brandon laughed along. I don't write this to shame you. I write it to make you see. Anita owes you nothing. If you can't apologize, then stay away. Let her grow without your guilt staining her roots. Grandma folded the paper and pressed it gently to her chest. Then she looked at my mother and said something that made the room hold its breath. You turned your own daughter into a stranger. And now you've lost her. My mother blinked rapidly, as if trying to summon tears, but none came. Just that same practiced emptiness she'd mastered over the years. She looked at me and finally said, "You think you're better than all of us now?" I stared at her. No. I think I'm finally free from you. Madison stood abruptly, arms trembling. So now it's all my fault? I was the one who stayed. I took care of Grandpa. I drove him to the hospital. I read to him. I was there. I stood too. You were there with conditions. With expectations. With a performance. You didn't love him. You managed him. Her face contorted, and for a second, I saw the child underneath all that privilege and vanity, the one desperate for approval, even if it meant stepping on someone else to get it. You don't deserve that center, she hissed. You don't deserve any of it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. You're right. I wouldn't deserve it if I became like you. That struck her harder than anything else I could have said. She turned to Grandma for rescue, but Grandma didn't speak. She only turned away and began clearing the teacups, as if the discussion was already over. And maybe it was. Because when I looked around the room, at the silence, at the guilt, at the hollow faces, I knew something had finally ended. Not just the reading of a will. Not just a legacy being transferred. But the long, slow erosion of a lie. My father returned eventually, quietly slipping through the front door and avoiding my eyes. He said nothing. Just gathered his coat and mumbled, "We should go." My mother followed him, still too proud to look back. Madison lingered by the door. "You'll regret this," she said. "Being on your own." I looked at her with a strange calm. I've always been on my own. And then she was gone. The door shut behind them with a finality that echoed in my bones. For a long time, Grandma and I didn't speak. She sat in her old rocking chair by the window, and I sat across from her, still holding the folded letter in my lap. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, and I realized this was the first time I could breathe. Later that night, I found myself walking through Grandpa's old study. The shelves still held his notebooks, tools, photographs, and the little figurines he'd carve when he wasn't working on a project. In the drawer of his desk, I found something wrapped in tissue paper, an old Polaroid photo. It was me, around 7 years old, wearing oversized safety goggles and holding up a glass beaker proudly. Grandpa stood beside me, laughing. On the back, written in his blocky handwriting, were the words, "The little scientist who will change the world." I placed it gently in my bag. That night, I slept in my childhood room for the first time in years. The posters were gone, the bookshelf dusty, but the air still held echoes of who I once was. Before the erasure. Before the betrayal. Before the lie. And in that room, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to take the research center. I was going to build it into everything Grandpa dreamed it could be. A place where curious kids weren't ridiculed. Where no one was told they were too different. Where brilliance didn't have to apologize. And where a legacy, finally, could mean truth. The first time I walked through the wide glass doors of Evan's biolab, I felt like I was stepping into the future my grandfather always saw in me. It wasn't grand or glamorous. In fact, the building was still half under renovation. Cardboard boxes stacked in corners. Lab tables still wrapped in plastic. A few ceiling panels missing. But to me, it was sacred ground, an unfinished cathedral built for the misfits and minds the world overlooked. The moment the keys turned in my hand, something inside me shifted. For so many years, I'd been the shadow at the family dinner, the voice they all learned to talk over. Now I was the one standing at the helm of something real, something with purpose. Grandpa didn't just give me a company, he gave me a mission. The first weeks were overwhelming. I slept in the tiny office in the back of the building, my backpack as a pillow and lab manuals stacked beside me. I combed through contracts, met with board members who had once dismissed me as that college girl, and began hiring staff who knew what it meant to be underestimated. I called Sarah, my former lab partner in college. She was brilliant, but constantly told by professors she was too opinionated to fit into corporate research. She joined within 2 days. Then Miguel, an environmental software engineer who'd been rejected from 3 major firms because he didn't have a degree from an Ivy League school. I didn't care. He showed me a prototype for an automated microclimate monitor he built in his garage, and I hired him on the spot. Within 2 months, we had a team. Young, diverse, underdogs in every sense. But hungry. Focused. And loyal. We launched our first project under a clear mission, to develop biodegradable alternatives to industrial lab plastics. Not exactly headline-grabbing, but practical. Impact fell. Grandpa would have loved it. And in the background, Grandma stayed by my side. Every Thursday, she visited with muffins from the Senior Center's baking club, wrapped in napkins with tiny cartoon bees on them. She insisted on sitting in the back of the conference room during staff meetings, notebook in hand, eyes focused. "You know," she said one day, sipping weak tea from the break room kettle, "I signed up for a science course at the community college." I stared at her. "You did what?" She grinned, lifting her little spiral notebook. "I want to understand what you're talking about when you say catalase inhibition and enzymatic degradation. Right now, you might as well be reciting Shakespeare in Mandarin." That was Grandma. When everyone else had wanted me to shrink, she had always stood beside me, holding the light. One afternoon, while sorting through Grandpa's old storage unit, we found a weathered cardboard box labeled simply, "Emma's Tools." I hadn't been called Emma in years, Grandpa's pet name for me, short for Enigma, he once joked. Inside were childhood projects I'd forgotten, a little circuit board made with copper tape and a coin battery, pages of handwritten notes from when I was 9, and a tiny metal badge from a local science camp I had begged to attend, only to have Mom pull me out of it midweek because it wasn't ladylike. I stared at the badge for a long time before pinning it to my office wall, right next to the mission statement I wrote in Sharpie. Make the world smarter, kinder, and impossible to ignore. 3 months after the will reading, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a Christmas card from my parents. It showed Madison and her new fiancé standing in front of a pristine condo in San Diego, holding a golden retriever puppy. The note on the back read, "Hope you're well. Remember, family isn't something you choose." I didn't reply. Because I had chosen. I chose the people who lifted me, not the ones who edited me. I chose the ones who saw fire and said, "Let it burn brighter, not tone it down." I still hadn't heard from Madison directly, but I wasn't surprised. She had always played the long game, the slow, smiling betrayal. But silence from her felt like a blessing. It meant I could finally build without the sound of her heels behind me, waiting to claim what I'd built. Yet I wasn't naive. I knew that people like her, like my mother, don't vanish. They circle. Wait. Watch. And I didn't have to wait long. It was mid-March when I received a request for a meeting from a private equity firm. When I arrived, I recognized the woman immediately. Crisp white blazer. Flawless makeup. Polished smile. My mother. She sat across from me like she was negotiating the sale of fine china. "Anita," she began, as if the last 6 months hadn't happened, "I heard about the progress you're making." Impressive. Really? I said nothing. Just waited. She continued. "We're offering a generous buyout. A complete acquisition of the center. You'd remain as a creative director, of course. And the board would have final say, naturally." I stared at her. "Why?" She tilted her head. "Because it's a smart move. You're young. You need support. Investors. Guidance." But I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't business. It was control. She wasn't there to help me succeed, she was there to manage what she had failed to kill. I leaned forward. "No." She blinked. "Excuse me?" I smiled. "No. I'm not selling. Not now. Not ever. You see, this isn't a company to me. This is my name. My story. My grandfather's heartbeat." Her mask cracked just slightly. "You don't know what you're doing." I stood. "Maybe. But I know what I'm not doing. I'm not handing my legacy to the same people who tried to erase it." Her voice turned icy. "You'll regret this." I nodded, walking out. "Maybe. But at least it'll be my mistake. Not yours." That night, I sat in the lab alone, watching the fluorescent lights flicker over the whiteboards filled with equations, ideas, scribbles. I pulled Grandpa's letter from the drawer beside my desk and read his final lines again. "Don't let them sell your light for their shadow. Build it. Name it. Protect it." I was doing just that. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving them. I was becoming something they couldn't reach. The days after my mother's offer passed like waves against a rock, slow, persistent, but unable to move me. She didn't reach out again. Not directly. But I could feel her presence lurking behind corporate emails, quiet rumors spreading in biotech forums, and the sudden uptick in interest from potential investors who always asked the same question in one form or another. "Would you consider stepping down if it meant expansion?" My answer never changed. I wouldn't step down from a place I had climbed alone. Instead, I doubled down. We launched our second initiative, developing a microbial water purification system designed for under-resourced rural communities. Sarah led the formulation. Miguel coded the monitoring software. And I presented it to a coalition of high schools looking to introduce real-life STEM applications to their science classes. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a research lab. It was a ladder. For kids like me. The ones who asked too many questions. The ones teachers overlooked. The ones families ignored. So I made a call to the school district. Proposed a partnership. We'll donate lab kits, I said. Run summer programs. Offer internships. They agreed within a week. The first group of students arrived that June, wide-eyed, nervous, but crackling with curiosity. A girl named Nyla reminded me so much of myself it almost hurt. She asked about every detail, wrote notes like her life depended on it, and stayed late even when her ride had already pulled up. One afternoon, I caught her staring at the framed photo of me and Grandpa by the reception desk. The one where he was adjusting my goggles, grinning like I'd just discovered gravity. "Was that your dad?" she asked. I smiled. He was better. He was my believer. She looked up at me, quiet for a moment. I don't think I have one of those. I crouched beside her and tapped the table. Then let's build you one. Right here. Later that night, alone in the lab, I wept. Not from pain. But from the overwhelming sense that maybe, just maybe, I had become the person I always needed. And yet, the past always finds a way to knock on the door you've locked. It was early July when it happened. A manila envelope slid under the front door of the lab. No postage. No sender. Inside were 3 sheets of paper. The first, a photocopy of a court motion. The second, a formal challenge to my inheritance filed by none other than Madison Evans. The third, a statement from her attorney, claiming undue influence over a vulnerable elderly man, and suggesting mental instability on Grandpa's part at the time of drafting his will. I laughed. Laughed so hard I scared Sarah in the next room. She ran in, alarmed. "What's wrong?" I handed her the envelope. "Madison's trying to rewrite history." Again. Her face twisted in disgust. "She doesn't have a case. You said the will was notarized, recorded, witnessed." It was. "Then she's just wasting your time." I nodded. "But that's the point. If she can't win, she'll try to wear me down." That night, I sat on the porch of Grandma's house, watching fireflies buzz in the summer dark. "Madison's suing," I said, sipping warm tea. Grandma didn't flinch. She simply leaned back in her chair. "Let her." "You're not worried?" "No. Because truth isn't worried." And neither was Thomas. He knew who you were. That's why he put protections in place. I looked at her, suddenly overwhelmed. Did he know how bad it would get? She nodded slowly. "He didn't just leave you money, Anita. He left you armor." And she was right. When we arrived at court 3 weeks later, Madison was already seated with her lawyer, an expensive one. She wore black like she was in mourning, her blonde hair pulled back, eyes rimmed in a shade of red that was probably cosmetic. When I walked in with my attorney and Grandma beside me, she didn't look at me. But I looked at her. And for once, I didn't feel small. The judge reviewed the documents, the witness testimony, the medical evaluations Grandpa had undergone in the last 6 months of his life, all clean. All confirming mental clarity. No signs of coercion. No doubts about capacity. The judge's gavel hit the desk like thunder. Petition denied. Madison's lawyer looked down. She looked stunned. But I didn't gloat. I stood, gathered my documents, and walked out with Grandma's hand in mine. Outside the courthouse, press had gathered. Not because of the inheritance, but because of the work Evans' biolab had been doing in underfunded districts. Word had gotten around. And suddenly, the overlooked girl with the goggles had become the face of ethical biotech. A reporter called out as we passed, "Anita, any comment on the court ruling?" I paused. Turned slightly. "Legacy," I said, "isn't about what you're given. It's about what you give back." And with that, I walked away. That night, I hosted the first open house at the lab. Parents, students, teachers. Local journalists. One kid brought their own homemade microscope and asked if I could help them improve it. I did. Then I gave them mine. Later, Grandma and I sat on the lab rooftop, watching the city lights flicker like tiny stars. "Do you miss them?" she asked. I didn't have to ask who she meant. "No," I said softly. "I miss who I used to hope they were. But I don't miss who they became." She nodded, pulling her cardigan tighter. "That's a kind of grief, too." "I know," I whispered. "But it's one I can carry." The wind picked up, warm and wild. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was healing. The summer faded into fall, and with it, the last remnants of who I used to be. Evan's biolab was no longer a fragile legacy in my hands. It had become a living thing, breathing, growing, becoming something Grandpa would have proudly walked through with that mischievous glint in his eye. We finalized our partnership with the school district and expanded into 4 new counties. Students came in weekly for workshops. We hosted our first Science for All Day, welcoming hundreds of kids, parents, and curious minds. That day, Nyla, the student who once said she had no one to believe in her, stood in front of a crowd and explained how she'd replicated a soil-based water filtration system. Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't lower. She was changing. And so was I. But change never happens without resistance. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my assistant buzzed into my office. "Anita, there's a woman here to see you. Says she doesn't have an appointment but won't leave." I sighed, bracing myself. "Who is it?" "She says she's your sister." I felt the air in the room tighten. My heartbeat didn't race, it steadied. Cold. Quiet. Familiar. "Send her in," I said. Madison walked in like she owned the building. Wearing a tailored coat, heels too sharp for a biotech lab, and carrying a purse worth more than our entire microscope shelf. But her eyes, those were the same. Calculated. Searching for weakness. "Nice place," she said casually, looking around. "Smells like bleach and ambition." "What do you want, Madison?" She shrugged, walked over to the glass wall, and stared out at the student lab on the first floor. "Just came to see what a betrayal looks like up close." I didn't respond. Just watched her. "You really think you won," she continued. "You think that piece of paper makes you worthy of all this?" I stood, arms crossed. "Grandpa thought so." She scoffed. "He was old. Tired. You caught him in a sentimental spell." I took a step closer. He was lucid enough to know manipulation when he saw it. And to know when someone only showed up out of greed. Her jaw tightened. "You have no idea what I gave up to stay," she said, voice growing sharp. "I canceled trips. Cared for him. Dealt with his doctors and moods and waited for him to die so you could collect," I finished. Her face twisted. "You're not better than me." "No," I said. "I just stopped pretending." She blinked. "You stayed in that house." "I left it. But only one of us ever actually loved him. Only one of us listened to his stories, his passions, his regrets. And it wasn't the one who read him Bible verses on cue." Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were real or rehearsed. With Madison, it was always a show. "I lost everything," she whispered. "No," I said. "You lost a performance. I found a purpose." She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked toward the door. Last chance, she said without looking back. Sell it. I have a buyer. Someone who can make you rich beyond anything Grandpa left behind. I walked over, opened the door for her. Get out. She walked through slowly, then stopped and looked over her shoulder. You'll regret this when the lights go out and there's no one left to clap. I met her gaze with a calm that came from deep inside. I'd rather build in silence than perform for liars. She left. The door shut behind her with a soft, final click. I stood there, hand on the knob, heart strangely still. I wasn't shaken. Not anymore. Because I finally understood something. Madison didn't come because she wanted to make peace. She came to confirm that I had one. And I had. That evening, Grandma and I sat in the backyard shed we'd converted into her reading nook. She was sipping cinnamon tea and flipping through her science course workbook. She glanced up. You okay? Yeah. She came, didn't she? Yeah. What did she want? I shrugged. Control. Closure. A second chance at inheritance. Did you give her any of it? I smiled. Just the door. She laughed, low and warm. Good. Let it swing both ways. We sat in silence for a while. Then she said something I hadn't expected. You know, the last conversation Thomas and I ever had was about you. I turned to her. He was worried, she said. Not that you'd fail. But that you'd carry the pain too long. That their silence would leave bruises on your soul. It did. I know. But it made space too, I said. Space for better things. Stronger love. Real belief. She nodded slowly. Then I guess he was right to trust you. The next morning, I walked into Evan's biolab just as the sun spilled golden light across the glass panels. Our new intern was waiting near the entrance. A shy boy, maybe 16, holding a sketchpad instead of a laptop. I'm not good with computers, he said. But I think I'm good with ideas. I smiled. That's all we need here. I led him inside, pointing out stations, showing him where the tools were, how to log data, where the fail board was, our big whiteboard where we wrote every experiment that didn't work and what we learned from it. As I spoke, I saw something shift in his eyes, like he was waking up. And in that moment, I realized. Madison might spend the rest of her life chasing things that look like power. But I was holding something real. Legacy. Truth. And the spark of every kid who ever wondered if they were too strange to belong. 5 years have passed since that courtroom showdown. Since the day I stood alone with nothing but a letter and a memory, and chose to build everything from it. I'm 29 now. And every morning, I still walk through the doors of Evan's biolab with the same quiet wonder I felt that very first time. Except now, it's no longer just a lab. It's a campus. 3 buildings. 64 full-time staff. Over 200 student fellows served across 4 states. We've partnered with environmental nonprofits, rural school boards, and a few community colleges, offering real opportunities to kids who were told, "You're too much. You don't fit." Here, they do. And in every hallway, on every wall, is a story like mine. The fail board from our early days is now digital, beaming every misstep and lesson onto the central display. I made sure of that. Because no one should feel ashamed of their stumbles, they're how we learn to walk strong. This year, we developed a biodegradable sensor that helps track soil depletion in drought-heavy farming zones. We're piloting it in Georgia, Alabama, and parts of eastern Indonesia. A kid named Elijah led the prototype team. 17 years old. Grew up fixing broken sprinklers for neighbors. Now he's speaking at international conferences. And in every press interview, he says the same thing. Anita Evans made a place for weird kids like me. I still get letters from strangers, students, parents, educators. But also from people who just needed to hear a story like mine. They say, "You reminded me I'm not crazy for wanting more. You made me pick up my old sketchbook." I finally left the people who kept telling me I wasn't enough. Those letters go into the same wooden box where I keep Grandpa's goggles, the old Polaroid, and the final note he wrote me from his hospital bed. When you step into your own world, don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong in it. I framed that sentence. It hangs above my desk. As for my family? Madison married someone wealthy. San Diego. Gated neighborhood. Baby boy. She sends yearly Christmas cards, but I no longer feel anything when I see her name. My parents, Claire and Brandon, haven't contacted me in 3 years. No apologies. No explanations. Just silence. And honestly? It's the most peace they've ever given me. Grandma still lives with me. She gardens in the morning, reads neuroscience textbooks at night. She passed her community college course and now volunteers at the local school teaching intro science to second graders. They call her Doc Rose. One day, as we sat watching the sunset from her reading shed, she asked me, "If you could say one thing to the Anita who stood outside this house all those years ago, holding a bag of cookies, what would it be?" I thought for a long time. Then I said, "Hold on. It's not you. And it's going to get better than you can imagine." Because it did. I didn't get a perfect family. But I got something better. A chosen one. The kids I mentor. The team I trust. The belief I carry. And the purpose that pulses through every test tube, every line of code, every student notebook. Sometimes, I still think about the day I found out Grandpa was gone. How broken I felt. How lost. But now, when I remember him, I see light. I see him watching me walk across the lab floor, turning on the lights in a building that wouldn't exist without him. I see him leaning down, adjusting goggles on another kid's face, whispering, "You were always meant for more." Because I was. We all are. Not everyone will believe in us. Some will silence us. Lie about us. Push us out. But in the end, it only takes one person to change everything. One believer. One voice. One light in the dark. For me, that was Grandpa. And now, I get to be that for others. To the child who was always too curious, too different, too much. Come here. We've been waiting for you. This is your place now. And your story? It's only just beginning. Anita's journey reminds us that rejection doesn't define us, resilience does. When the people who are supposed to love us choose silence, we have the right to find our own voice and use it to lift others. Family doesn't always share your blood. Sometimes, they share your vision. Your belief. Your truth. If you've ever felt cast aside, misjudged, or forced into a mold that didn't fit, know this: your light doesn't need permission to shine. What about you? Have you ever had to rebuild yourself from the ground up? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more powerful stories that speak louder than revenge.